Welcome to the 1 Minute Apologist. We interview the world's leading apologists to provide credible answers to curious questions. Lenny, what does Forrest Gump have to do with the reliability of the Gospels?
Well, that's a great question. I love to use modern movies in order to make my point. Right now, there's a big surge, especially in the internet, of folks who are Jesus mythicists, believe that the idea of Jesus even living at all is a myth. A guy named Earl Doherty was a guy who wrote, "Once upon a time, someone wrote a story about a man who was God. We don't know who that someone was or where he wrote his story. We're not even sure if he wrote it, but we do know that several decades had passed since the supposed events he told of. Later generations gave the storyteller the name of Mark," and then he goes on to say that after that, everybody started believing in this thing. That's what Jesus mythicists hold. Now, the problem with this description, like Doherty offers, is you have the Apostle Paul, who writes 1 Corinthians in the 50s, 20 years, 30 years after. But Paul believes that Jesus is God. So let's take Forrest Gump as a parallel, right? You have a movie that has a whole bunch of historical references that are accurate historical references, peoples and places that really live. And picture a high-ranking ISIS official who sees the movie Forrest Gump in 2015 and says, well, this was written in 1999 and it talks about the 60s, that's 30 or 40 years, and I see a Bubba Gump Shrimp Company restaurant, and I know that Kennedy lived, and wow, this Forrest Gump may have really lived. Do you think that ISIS guy is going to, on the basis of this tale, convert and turn to Christianity? That doesn't make sense. Yet the Apostle Paul was just as vehement in his persecution of Christians as the ISIS guys were. He was out killing them. That was his whole point. He said that Jesus appeared to him directly. So the problem here is it's not enough to make an accusation that, oh, Jesus didn't live and this whole story grew. You have to explain why the Apostle Paul converted. And that's a big flaw in the Jesus mythicist movement. They never talk about Paul and why somebody who has an ISIS ideology would then flip.